Hello, Jeff here. Welcome to CS161. As you get ready to work on assignment 2, which will be your first C++ programming assignment, what I want to do is show you a few things around basic input and output. This will kind of arm you with some of the information you need to get going on assignment 2. Just a reminder that assignment 1 is just about algorithms and there's no code there. Inevitably, a few of you will write programs for assignment 1 because you've done it before. I just want to reiterate that that one is just about algorithms. So here's a basic empty program here. And I always like to, and maybe it's a little bit of a kind of the systematic piece of me, to make sure that I have my program loaded and running properly in my environment before I start to modify it. So if I go ahead and just run this program, I basically get no output, right? But my program ran successfully. This is a good starting point. This is basically, I think, one of my previous hello world examples minus the hello world message, right? And so let's kind of go through a few basics of input here. So most programming languages, probably all programming languages, in fact, have this concept called a variable. And a variable is a symbolic name for a space in memory that you can access and use from time to time. And so in C++, I might declare a variable something like this. This means we are creating a variable called a, and it is of integer data type. So an integer data type is a whole number. For those of you that are new to programming, you'll have these terms that don't always correspond with mathematical terms. And so an integer and a whole number are the same thing, right? So I could put that in the comments here to help. Is a whole number. Okay, by declaring this like this, I'm not really doing anything other than forcing the program to create this space of memory, which will always have during the execution of this program, and I can assign values to this a, and I can print them, and I can use them, and so on. So let's go ahead and try that. If I go ahead and try to just print out, and I'm going to show you two things at once here, right? So I'm going to try to print out the value a, and I'm going to try to print out a variable called b. Now you might notice there's a little squiggly there, right? And if I mouse over the squiggly, it says b is unidentified, right? So I've identified a, and I have not identified b. Let's see what happens when I try to run this. So I get some build errors. I get one in this case, and it says here that b is an undeclared identifier. So let's go ahead and declare it, and I can declare both on the same line like this. Or I can do it like this. I can do it either way, right? I tend to declare my variables mostly line by line because it gives me more structure that I want to use. So now if I run that, now I get a couple errors, and it's basically telling me now that I'm using the variable, but I haven't initialized it yet. And if you look at this code right here, I've allocated space, but I haven't given it a value. So if I give it a value, by doing something like that, and then I run this again, I get the same error just on variable b now. So I'm making progress here, and I can just give that a different value. And now when I run it, I get my two values there, right? I print out a, which is 10, and I print out b, which is 5. Generally, you don't want to print things out by themselves, right? So you might say something like the value of a variable a is, and you could see what I could do is I could put multiple things associated with cout on the same line using this double angle bracket or less than sign to kind of be used as a delimiter, right? So let's run this and see what I get. Now I have the value of a variable a is 10, and I still have 5 by itself. So far, so good. one of the things that you're going to do in assignment 2 is you're going to create variables, you're going to manipulate them, and you're going to print them. But you're also going to get values from the user instead. So what we'll do with B here is we'll actually ask the user to give us a value for B. So I still have to initialize it, right? And now I'm going to say CN B. CN stands for basically console input, where Cout stands for console output. And so if I run this, let's see what happens. I get a build error. And that's because I have my brackets backwards, which I always do. So now the program is stopped, right? And you might look at this and say, well, maybe it's done, or maybe it's crashed or something. But what it's doing is it's waiting for a value. So if I type in a value and hit return, the program ends properly. So it's always a good practice to say, to give the user what's called a prompt here. And so now when we run this, we'll get A printed as 10, like before. I get some goofy stuff going on. And now it's asking me to enter the integer value. So maybe I'll type a different value here, and then my program ends. You can tell I got Python on the brain as I type print, right? The product of our two variables is end line. So now what I did here is I declared a third variable called C. I set it equal to the value of A times B. And now I'm going to print out that result. So if this all worked, we'll type -100 for B, and I get the product of our two variables is -1000. So that's it. Very basic input and output using integers. As we get through this program, you're going to use different data types, non-integer data types that are real numbers, or floating point numbers as they're called in computer science, strings and characters and so on. Just to give you an example, if I type something like this in, my program ran and it gave me an answer of 0. If you did this in Python, Python would complain, right? You might remember that we had a big problem early on in Python where we had to learn how to do this error checking. C++ is more forgiving of input coming from the user. The problem is it basically will handle it in a way that you may not be prepared, and it actually could be worse. So for these early assignments, you do not need to do this type of error checking, right? You don't, like if I ask, if you ask the user to enter an integer and when I'm grading and I decide not to, that's my fault, right? As we get into the programs later, you'll learn how to do that error checking. So basic input and output, basic variable manipulation. This gives you kind of some of the prereqs, if you will, to do the assignment 2, which I believe is the Ohm's law electric circuit formula. And if you have any comments or questions, just post them here in the discussion forum in response to this post. And good luck on the program, and we'll talk soon.